Hi, everybody. My name is Buddy Gott. Welcome to the Gotta Pop podcast, which covers all different kinds of things in the world of pop culture. And today I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite TV shows ever. And I'm thrilled to have a guest with me on the show today. And that is another fan of this TV show, and that's Sarah Callen. Welcome to the show, Sarah.
Hi, thanks for having me. I am excited to talk about this show. It is also one of my faves, so this should be fun.
I'm looking forward to it. And I don't think I've mentioned the name of the show yet, but the show, folks, is Psych, the classic TV show Psych, which ran for 8 seasons on the USA Network. It started in 2006 and ran through 2014, and it had a big following then, and I think the following has probably even grown since then because of people being able to watch it on, well, gosh, going back to videotape and DVDs, but now streaming. I know it's currently available on the Peacock network and probably elsewhere as well. But have you been a fan of the show since its original run, Sarah?
Yeah, I have. I am a bit of a detective mystery fan, so I'm always looking for a new murder mystery show. And I remember when Psych came out, it felt like such a breath of fresh air because it's
Hmm.
it's kind of a different take on the detective genre, and it's just so silly. And so
Yeah.
it was nice to have a pure comedy that is also a mystery. And yeah, fell in love with the characters right away.
That's how, well, you know what? It's funny. I didn't fall in love with it right away.
Mm.
Initially, I had heard about the series, and I think my interest was piqued a little bit because I saw that Dule Hill was in it, and I
Mhm.
had known him from being in The West Wing, and I'm like, oh well, what's he doing now that he's not on The West Wing anymore? And I'm like, oh, okay, I, and this was maybe me being a little bit of a snob, but I saw it was on the USA Network. And while they had some good shows, some of their
Yeah.
original programming was a little shaky sometimes. I'm like, oh, please let this be good. And then I heard the concept of it. I'm like, oh, this guy's pretending to be psychic to help solve crimes. I'm like, I don't know. And then I was a big fan of it probably 15 minutes into it, just because of, like you
Mhm.
said, how silly and how fun it is. And I am a big nerd, geek, whatever you want to call it, when shows get into talking and making references to pop culture. And
Mhm.
my gosh, they do that a lot on here. Sean and Gus and others, there's so many references to not only television, but to music, movies, and it's just such a clever and unique series.
Yeah, and I also love the way that it uses meta commentary too. So
Hmm.
bringing in stars from the 80s. So you see, a lot of members of the Brat Pack and all of that who get to come in, and all of the little riffs off of 80s pop culture in particular are just so fun to see.
I agree with you. I was just looking through a list of like some of the actors and actresses who had guest
Mhm.
starred on the series over the years, and yeah, I had written down a couple that well you just referred to, like you had some of the quote unquote Brat Packers in there, like Judd Nelson, Ali Sheedy, Molly Ringwald had all shown up
Mhm.
at different times. I want to say C. Thomas Howell was in an episode too, I think.
I think
Some
so.
of them I haven't seen since the original run, so I'm a little shaky on them now. But
I mean, there are 8 seasons, so
yeah,
it's a lot of episodes to remember.
it is, and I watched it pretty faithfully throughout the original run. But I think I don't know how I remember this, but I think it was originally on Friday nights, like around like 10 p.m. or something, at least here on the
Mm.
East Coast. And I watched it pretty regularly, and then I got a job that worked. I had to work some nights, so I was missing a lot of it. So like the last few seasons, I didn't get to watch as much as I would like, but the beauty of doing a show like this is you and I were talking about doing this. So I started
Mhm.
rewatching the series, and I've got the Peacock network. So I'm basically going to rewatch the whole thing. I've been handpicking right now. I'm like, I chose a couple from season one, a couple from season five, and hopping all around the place. But I think it requires a full rewatch. And what's nice is my wife, Lisa, did not watch the show when it originally ran.
Oh.
And I think she would love it because she likes murder mysteries and things
Mm.
like that. And also, she became a fan of James Roday, who now goes by James Roday Rodriguez. He plays Sean on Psych, but he after Psych he went on to a popular series on ABC called A Million Little Things, and she
Mhm.
knew him from that and liked him on there. And that was also a very good series, much different than Psych though. And I want to backtrack just a second because I introduced you at the beginning, but I wanted to let folks know too that you've got your own you've got two podcasts that deal with pop
I
culture,
do.
both TV and movies. And
Yep.
let's talk about those for a minute. You've got TV and Us, right?
Yep. Yes. Yeah. So TV and Us, we go in depth on a TV show and we review a season of TV episode by episode. So we got a lot going on over there, gone through quite a few shows. We are about to start season 9 of TV and Us, which is
Oh,
going to
wow.
be all about Severance season 1 and anticipation of season 2 coming out next year. So yeah, TV and Us, wherever you get your podcasts.
That is awesome. And just before we talk about the other one, I do want to mention, well, I'll just say that you've got me. I'm already excited to watch Severance. I haven't watched that yet. And it just looks so good. I like Adam Scott from other things, and
Mhm.
I checked out some of your episodes, I guess earlier this year, because some I didn't because I want to watch the series and I haven't yet. So I
Yeah.
want to, you're a TV fan, you know what that's like. Then you kind
Yes.
of want to like stay blind to anything about the series, and
Yep.
but my wife and I had watched the last season of True Detective, and you had done that, the one with
Mm-hmm.
Jodie Foster, and
Yep.
I really enjoyed the episodes of your show. Talking about that, we had a lot of the same thoughts on it.
Oh, good.
Yeah, it was,
Yeah, we had a lot of fun with those, and there's a lot of rants in those episodes, so that's always a good time.
which is fun. That's one of the fun things about podcasts. I think
Yeah.
you can rant about the series, and that can segue into other things, and it's a lot of fun. Oh, and you co-host that with
Hmm.
someone, correct?
Yes. Yep. My friend Jen, we love talking about movies together, and then we also love talking about TV together. So that's why we started TV and Us.
That's great. And then Movies and Us is your other show,
Hmm.
right?
Yep. And that is just a weekly movie review podcast. And so we do some new releases. We've started doing some older releases too. So there's a good mix there. So yeah,
That's
Movies and
fun.
Us and TV and Us. It's easy to remember.
It's very easy to remember. And it's fun when you mix it up like that and cover new
Mhm.
things and old things. Obviously, we're talking about an old show here today, but I like to cover new things too. So it's nice to have some variety. And
Mhm.
it's nice not to ignore older series like Psych too. Not that it's ancient, but to some people it might be. It ended 10 years
That's
ago.
true. Oh
But
my gosh.
yeah, I know that's kind of hard to believe, isn't it?
That is very hard to believe. Wow. Yep.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the characters on here. I had mentioned James Roday. He plays for those who don't know, he played basically lead character, Sean Spencer, who is this freelance consultant slash private eye who works primarily for the Santa Barbara
Santa
Police
Barbara.
Department.
Yep.
Yeah, with his lifetime best friend, Burton Gus Guster, played by Dule
Mhm.
Hill, who I mentioned earlier, and those two. I mean, you want to talk about chemistry? Those two actors,
Mhm.
don't you think they were just amazing together?
Yes. Yeah, they're so much fun. And it's so cool to see how their relationship evolves over all of the seasons too. And you learn little bits about each of them and what makes them tick along the way. And I I appreciate because sometimes in comedies it can almost be a little like flat or there's not like a lot of character development over time, but I feel like you really get to know these two and their chemistry is spot on the whole time and they go through ups and downs. They have
Hmm.
conflict with each other. They have to work through some real things. They go through some like life stage changes too that they have to work through. So
Yeah,
there's
they
just
do.
there is a lot to that relationship and it's really cool to see all of that happening within the context of this really silly comedy.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And one of the things I liked about the series too, if it wasn't every episode, it was darn near every episode where it would start out with a flashback to them as children
Mhm.
because like I said earlier, they're lifelong friends. So I think you might see it like they'll flash a date on screen like 1987, 88, something like that. And you'll see a scene with them that in some way maybe relates to the episode that we're watching and the storyline
Mhm.
that we're watching. And also well, it's just something because, like you said, their relationship goes through so much, and in some ways they're best friends. In some ways, it's like they're brothers. Some ways, it's like they're
Yeah.
a married couple who are having
Yep.
spat sometimes. And the way they play off of each other, they'll call each other little nicknames that maybe no one else gets, and they have the same loves in pop culture. And Gus is, in a lot of ways, I guess some people might call him kind of nerdy,
Mhm.
but that's part of his appeal. He's got this great little
Yeah.
car what do they call it?
Yeah,
Blueberry?
the blueberry.
It's this tiny. I don't know what model of car it is,
Think
but
is it a Yaris or something like that?
something like that. Yeah, I think you're right.
It's a
But it's just
little Toyota,
yeah, it's
blue
just like a
Toyota
little. It
car.
doesn't even look like a real car. It's this little
Yeah.
fun car, and they'll go on car chases and chase bad guys and get into these adventures in this little car, and it just suits them perfectly, I think. And they're so great. And there's other great characters on here too. Well, I didn't really stress this earlier. For those who don't know, well, you should watch the show, and you probably have a basic understanding of it, folks. But basically, Sean was raised by his father. Was played by Corbin Burnson. He's Henry Spencer in the show, and he was this detective on the police department, the same one that they consult with now. And he kind of trains Sean, no kind of about it. He's training Sean like almost from infancy on how to be a great
Hmm.
detective and how to look out for things, what to look at every time you enter a room. And he'll quiz him on things like how many hats did you see
Yep.
in the diner that we go in. And so Sean becomes this expert, like even surpassing his father and others. He's just a natural at doing those sorts of things. So he's got these great detection capabilities. And I think it's in the pilot episode. You see that he'll occasionally make anonymous calls into the police department to help them
Hmm.
solve crimes. Like he sees something on television, and then in the little clip they show, he'll spot a clue that will help the police, nail the whatever they're doing, the criminal. And what happens is he's in a situation where he basically knows what's going on with the crime, and not not to give away everything, but he pretends that he's psychic. He pretends that that's how he's able to do these things. So and then he starts becoming a consultant with Gus for the police department. And then they also have their own PI firm. And I mentioned his father, Henry. I like Henry's character a lot. He's
Hmm.
kind of tough, don't you
Yeah.
think?
Yeah, and I really love how you see more of Henry throughout the show too. So like
Hmm.
not to be like spoilery, but he starts out in the beginning almost like an antagonist to Sean, and you see this like animosity that Sean has toward his dad. And
Hmm.
then over the course of the show, you see Henry's love for his son coming
Yeah.
out in different ways. And so it's this really interesting balance of Henry is super hard on Sean, but it's not coming from a place of like wanting to be domineering or like dictatorial or anything, but
Hmm.
it truly is coming from a place of love. And they're just very different people that
Very,
don't
very
know how to
different people.
communicate to each other. So it's just fun to see that relationship grow over 8 seasons as well.
I agree with you. And again, I haven't seen the pilot in a while, but if I
Hmm.
recall, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I want to say the series started out with them having been estranged for a while. They may have
Hmm.
gone through a period of
Yep.
time where they didn't talk. And I think now that, Sean starts working with the police department, that's a bond that helps bring them closer together. Henry's retired from the police department, but Sean will still go to him for help and get him kind of involved with things from time to time. So I think that helps their relationship grow a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of in the beginning, it's almost like, is Henry gonna expose Sean too? Like there's almost this question of like, man, how long can Sean get away with this? And is Henry gonna spill the beans? Because he threatens it a few times early in the show. And it's just cool to see him go from almost this like threat to Sean at the beginning to being really a helper throughout the
Hmm.
show.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with you. I love their relationship, and there's
Hmm.
so many great characters and relationships in here. Two of the other main characters on there are two of the police detectives that
Hmm.
Sean and Gus, and occasionally Henry too, will interact with, and that is Lassie, Carlton Lassiter, played by, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce his last name, Timothy Amundsen. I'm not sure how you say it, but anyway.
Sounds great to me.
Well, thank you very much. You're a great guest, agreeing with me on that. Thank you. And then you have Jules O'Hara, played by Maggie Lawson, and there is instantly an attraction from Sean for Jules. And that's one of the reasons I think that he wants to continue doing this, pretending that he is a psychic and helping on these cases. And also because he's just so good at it. That is
Yeah.
what he was like born to do. He has not had luck with jobs throughout his life.
Hmm.
A lot of this is just coming back to me now, but you hear like all these different jobs that he has had. None of them have lasted very long at all, and this is what he was born to do. And
Hmm.
and I mentioned they call him Lassie. That's the nickname that Sean gives him. It's Carlton Lassiter, but he's the kind of cop that I think he fancies himself sort of like a Dirty Harry type,
Hmm.
kind of
Yep.
the tough cop from like you'd see on TV in the 70s and 80s. But and well, him and Sean clash quite a bit because Sean is really kind of out there. He's wild. He is not just because he's working with the police does not mean he is trying to act like a police officer. Sean is being Sean. He is being goofy. He is breaking rules. They're not following police procedures when they're out
Hmm.
doing their own investigation separate from the police, and they clash quite a bit. But there is a respect there too, especially over time. You see Lassiter kind of gain some respect for Sean, often
Hmm.
reluctantly.
Yes, very much so.
But he and Maggie, I'm sorry, not Maggie, that's the actress's name. Him and Juliet are really great characters too. I like them a lot. And you see their relationship grow as well because they are, I think at the very, very beginning, it might have just been the pilot episode. It wasn't Juliet there. There was another
Hmm.
character who I think might have been Carlton's ex-girlfriend or
Yeah,
ex-lover. Does that sound
they're
right?
like dating in the
That's
pilot
right.
episode, and Sean calls them out and gets them in trouble. So she has to transfer away.
That's right. I thought it was something like that.
Yep.
And Juliet comes in. So you could see their relationship grow too, because, like I said, he kind of views himself as being the hard, tough cop, and she's younger, so he kind of, maybe doesn't treat her with quite the respect that he should towards the beginning, but he quickly comes to see that she's a great detective, probably in some ways even better than he is.
Hmm.
And I love their relationship. And also you have well, their chief at the police station, who is Karen Vick, played by Kirsten Nelson, and she's a good character too.
Yeah.
I like her quite a bit. She Vick, and she's another one too that is not always so sure about Sean and Gus because
Hmm.
they're so off the wall, but she respects what he does, and it's just such a fun show.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting, especially with Chief Vic too, because she respects that Sean brings results. And so
Hmm.
she's willing to, especially in that pilot, the reason why she takes a risk on him is because she has to deliver some results for this really influential, rich person. And so she's like, okay, well, what else am I going to do? Let's maybe think outside of the box. Traditional methods aren't working. And so you see that a lot throughout that first season too, where she's like, okay, well, I'm kind of backed into a corner. I need results. So okay, let's let's give Sean a try. But then, like you said, over the course of seasons, they build up that trust between each other. And eventually Sean is actually part of the team rather than just some like quirky addition that they bring in when nothing else has worked.
Exactly. And I think, yeah, you're right. Because I think if I remember correctly, like towards the beginning of the series, a lot of times it's not so much that they're asked to be on the case. They find out about the
Hmm.
case and they kind of like
Yeah.
worm their way into it. But
Yes.
then later, as the trust has developed, the chief has come to respect them and know that they get results. They're called like as soon as there is a case. And if I
Hmm.
recall too, like towards the beginning, the chief was trying to prove herself because she was
Yep.
the interim chief at when we first meet her. She didn't fully have the job yet, but between her and the work that she did and her team, she became chief because good things were happening there.
Yeah, yeah, and I love that it is Chief Vic, or I guess interim Chief Vic at first,
Right.
because when we first meet her, she is a woman, obviously, and so being a female leader leading a police department in a very male-dominated field, like that's huge as it is. But when we first meet her, she's pregnant, and I
Oh
think that
gosh, yeah.
that's such a big deal too. Like it's so unexpected to
Hmm.
have a pregnant police chief, especially an interim police chief. And so she has all of those extra reasons to have to prove herself. And so it just makes sense why she would be willing to take such a risk because she has to.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And I think too that it wasn't just having to deal with, Sean, the outsiders, Sean and Gus. But I remember Lassiter, right? I think was even
Hmm.
not really respecting her as much
Yep.
towards the beginning. I don't want to say that he was. I mean, there were times I guess he displayed some male chauvinistic tendencies for sure. But I think for the most part, he felt. Well, sort of like how she grew to feel about Sean. He saw that she was good at what she did,
Hmm.
and he
Yeah.
did respect that. And well, gosh, we talked about different guest stars on the show too. There was so many guest stars over the years. One that I liked
Hmm.
that would show up from time to time was Felicia Rashad, played Gus's mother.
Yes.
Sometimes I forget her character's name, but it was I was a fan of the old
It's
Cosby Show, and
yeah.
I've liked her in other things, so it was good to see her on there. And one that I like quite a bit was, I don't want to give any too much away here, but there was a recurring charming bad guy on there named
Hmm.
Pierre Despereaux. Do you remember Pierre Despereaux?
Yep, those are
Yeah,
some great episodes. He shows up quite a few times too, and it
yeah, he
always
does.
leads to a really fun adventure for our little team to go on.
Yeah, absolutely. And he was played by I've heard so many pronunciations on his name, but Carrie
Yeah.
Elwes or Elways,
Yep.
however you want to say it, who is probably best known for starring in The Princess Bride, among many, many, many other things. And I just love him in this role because
Hmm.
he's this very, he's a bad guy who you just want to love because
Yes.
he's charming and just such a great character. And I'm sorry, were you going to say something else?
No, I was just gonna say he like Carrie Elways has such a charismatic personality too, and he
Mhm.
has such a dynamic presence on screen. And it just seems like he's having so much fun in his role on Psych because he can just be him. He can be like the most like extreme version of himself and just have all of this charisma just like oozing off of the screen. It's so much fun to watch. He just
So much
excels in
fun.
that role.
Yeah, and like you said, he was in multiple episodes. I don't think he
Mhm.
came into like maybe what the midway point or maybe some of the later seasons, but they used him a lot
Yeah.
after that.
Yep.
Yeah, and well, gosh, there's some that I don't want to say too much about, but Ali Sheedy became a
Oh,
recurring
so good.
character on there too. Yeah, I can't say too much about that for people, but if you're a fan of the show, I think you know what I'm
Yeah.
talking about. There's a character too named Mr. Yang who's involved with those episodes.
Hmm.
Very very good. And then some of the recurring ones you had on there too were, I mentioned the beginning of the episodes where you would see the young Sean, young Gus, and
Hmm.
young Henry too, where I think they gave him a toupee to help him
Yep.
look younger. But you had a couple of different actors who played them as children. They actually had to change them as the series went on because
Hmm.
the series went on, so you had to like cast older ones. But I know one of the kids. Has actually gone on to a pretty good career now. He is, I'm trying to think his name here, actor named Skylar
Hmm.
Gisondo, who went on to be in like Santa Clarita Diet and some other shows. I love when when you see that, when you see characters, I mean actors and actresses just continue on from childhood to having successful careers. Any other recurring characters that you liked on there quite a bit?
I think those are the main ones that you hit. Uh yeah, Sybil Shepherd also
Oh,
shows
that's
up
right. Yeah.
throughout, and that's a really good role for her, and she plays kind of a pivotal role in those few episodes that she's in.
Yeah, yeah, she does. Very pivotal role. And I was very happy to see. I was a fan of the old Moonlighting TV show. I don't know if you ever
Mm-hmm.
saw that, but I liked her a lot in that. So it was nice to see her pop up on here from time to time. There's a couple other characters who are, while not main characters, they showed up quite a bit throughout the series. And one was the coroner on the show named Woody.
Yes.
And Woody's in quite a few episodes. He's in one of my favorites too, which I want to mention a little later on. But he's played by actor Kurt Fuller, who has had a very long career as a character actor. Matter of fact, he just finished a role on Evil. I don't know if you've ever seen the show Evil, but
No, I haven't gotten to that one.
oh boy, that's quite a show. It's pretty crazy. It just ended. I want to say last week or the week before, but he was on there and many other things throughout the years. And then there's a police officer that works with them a lot. He is a uniformed police officer named Buzz McNabb, and played
Hmm.
by Sage. I want to make sure I get his name here. Sage Brocklebank. He's a little naive, but he's this lovable cop, and he's one too that he's smarter than you might think upon first meeting him, because I think sometimes, like especially Lassiter, might have been dismissive of
Hmm.
him, just thinking he was like this young, naive, not very knowledgeable cop. But he's a great character too. And
Yeah, and it's so fun to see Buzz get under Lassiter's skin because
yeah,
he just Buzz has the worst timing known to man, is just a lot of what it is. Because
it's
it's
true.
very early on. I think it's in the first season. I don't remember which episode. And Buzz is about to get married, and he's really nervous about that. And he wants to ask Lassiter some questions about getting married, that first wedding night, and all of the pressures that he's building up in his head. And number one, Lassiter is the wrong person for that conversation. But number two, Buzz
That's for
picks
sure.
a terrible time to try and have that conversation with Lassiter. And that's just kind of indicative of Buzz's whole relationship with Lassie throughout the season. Buzz will like want something and he'll want to ask Lassiter, and it's always wrong.
Yeah, and as I said earlier, I just now want to, and the more we're talking about this, I just want to rewatch the entire
Mhm.
series again.
It's so good.
It is so good. And one recurring character, well, he's actually a real person that popped up a couple times in the show that I loved, was singer and musician Kurt Smith from the band Tears for Fears. Pops up in at least, I want to say, 2 or 3 episodes.
Mhm.
And I can't really tell you the circumstances as to how that all happens, because that would take away from the fun of it. But I'm a big Tears for Fears fan, and to see him in
Mhm.
here and singing and doing some acting and actually being pretty darn funny in
Mhm.
the scenes, it was very entertaining for me.
Well, and it's so great because, like you mentioned, this show is just littered with references, and
Hmm.
they're always making references to movies, music, TV, all of the things. And so Sean references Tears for Fears quite a number of times before then you finally see him actually show up. So it's just a really satisfying thing that you see throughout the show, is that like the characters will mention something, or they'll reference, a favorite pop culture something or other, and then either the actor or the musician or whoever it is will show up in some way, or in a future episode they'll reference that movie somehow with the plot or something. Like, it's all just so well integrated together. The pop references aren't just there to be like silly or cute, but they actually are like woven into the show and woven into the plot in a really intentional way that you don't always see.
Yes, exactly. Matter of fact, with you having said that, it goes just with what I had said a little while ago, that I've been rewatching some episodes, and I know just rewatching these, there were some things I remembered the episodes. I picked out some of my personal favorites,
Hmm.
ones that I had seen multiple times and loved. But watching them again, I was picking up on things that I maybe missed the first time, because yes, the show, a lot of people would view it as just being this very silly, fun detective show,
Hmm.
but it's really clever. The writing
Yeah.
on here was, a rated, or I'm not sounding very a rated right now, but it was top notch stuff, that's for
Yeah.
sure. And one of the creator of the show, Steve Franks, I know he
Hmm.
wrote a lot of the episodes, and he was just brilliant, and he's a big pop culture fan himself.
Hmm.
And one of the things I love about Steve Franks is he and his band actually did the theme song for the show.
Yep.
And if you know the show, I'm sure you know and love the theme song. I guess it's "I Know You Know," or just the theme from
Hmm.
Psych. And his group is called the Friendly Indians. I don't know how much else they ever did besides that song, but I love that song. What I thought was fun too is, I'm sorry, were you going to say something? I don't want to cut.
No, no, you're good. I was just gonna say, like, with the theme, they're
Mhm.
also so fun to modify it to match the content of an episode. So I really love the Boys to Men version of it. That's all
Yes,
a
yes.
cappella. So just little things like that, or they'll turn it to Christmas or whatever. So just it's such a fun song. It's so iconic, but they're not married to that song being that way. And so they're willing to modify it just for another extra little, I don't know, bit of fun for us as the audience.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of fun. That's what I was about to say. Is I remember one time, I think I can't remember which episode it was, but I remember it being sung in Spanish, because
Yes. Yep.
and that might have been All right, I'm going to segue into something right now. We talked before that we might talk about some of our favorite episodes, and
Mhm,
one of my favorite episodes is where Sean went undercover as an actor on a
mhm.
Spanish language soap opera, and
Yep.
I think it might have been the theme for
I
that
th
one.
I think so.
But that was such a funny episode. That's where James Roday, I think, just totally won me over. I'm like, this guy is hilarious. Yes, he's great at playing like the dramatic and silly parts, but he's just such a very, I don't know, very talented actor, I think, and he was great in that episode.
Yes, that one is so funny, and just the man, he is trying to like play this part on this telenovela
Hmm.
with 8th grade Spanish or maybe like high school
Yeah, it wasn't
Spanish.
the best.
Like it's not great. And so there are certain parts where he tries to like ad lib and he doesn't know Spanish. And so
No.
those moments are so funny to watch him try and scramble. And so then he has to enlist the help of some other people, and they don't have the same flair that he does. So it's just very funny to watch him just navigate that whole episode.
That was, and I wrote down the titles of some of my favorites here. That one was from season 2, and it was called
Mhm.
Lights, Camera, Homicidio, or something. Homicidio. I don't know. I doubt that that's a real word, but do you have any particular favorites that you want to mention from the
Oh my
series? It
gosh,
seems like you probably love them
there are
all.
so many of them. I was like, "Okay, yeah, I'm just gonna watch a few of my favorites before we record," and I watched like half of season 1. Like,
I know what you
the
mean.
show is so good.
Yeah, and it's so
Um,
addicting.
it is so addicting. I love I love the Cloudy with a Chance of Murder one, in the first season. I know a
Oh.
lot of people maybe don't love that one as much, but it just combines a few of my favorite loves, which is a murder mystery and a lawyer procedural, all
Hmm.
within, the Psych universe. So that is a favorite of mine. It's just so silly watching Sean try and be a lawyer, and then Gus also stepping up to be a lawyer
That's
is
right.
hilarious.
I didn't recognize it by the title alone there, but now that you said those parts, I'm like, oh yeah, that was really good. That was really good. And that's a show that, a lot of shows take a while to find their footing, but I think
Mhm.
they hit a lot out of the ballpark right in the first
Yeah,
season. I mean, they had
yeah.
some great ones then.
Yeah, I was kinda surprised because all of the episodes kinda get jumbled in my
Hmm.
brain after a while,
Yeah, me
and
too.
so when I pulled up, the show to start rewatching it again, I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is all in the first season? Oh, no."
Yeah, that was a great one. And it looks like you might have some others there.
Yeah, I also really love, the Black and Tan episode, The Crime of Fashion, where they go
Oh.
undercover as supermodels.
Oh my gosh, I
Uh,
forgot all about that. I probably
right?
haven't seen that since it originally ran. Oh my gosh. That was a good one. That was really
Yeah,
good.
yeah, it's just again, it's just so funny, and in that episode in particular, because Sean wants to be a model. That is his thing. He wants it so bad, and everybody's like, "You're not a model. You can be a hand model." And, like, they're so mean to him. He is not the model, whereas Gus doesn't wanna be a model, but they're like, "Yes, Gus, you are a model. You are one of us." And it's so funny watching them have to deal with all of that. Sean is constantly trying to, like, compete and be
Oh
model
yeah.
worthy and, also solve a murder at the same time.
I'm probably gonna end up watching that like after we finish recording this afternoon. That was a really good one. I love that. And we'll hop back and forth here. I'll tell you one of
Yeah, yeah,
mine.
yeah.
Now, this actually kind of plays back to what we talked about earlier with Sean's love of Tears for Fears. There was an
Mhm.
episode it was the first episode of the second season. It was called American Duos. And
Yes.
I was looking before we recorded this at I went online, found like some articles like from Entertainment Weekly and some other places with fan favorite episodes, lists of them.
Mm,
And this one
mhm.
repeatedly shows up on there. It was sort of a play on the American Idol TV show where
Mhm.
they go in a show called American Duos, where unlike American Idol, which they allude to, but they never actually say the title of it. They said it's kind of like that other show, but with
Yeah.
duos. They do a lot of that kind of thing in there, where you would hear them reference things, like even like there were references later on to the Mentalist TV show that ran on CBS,
Yes.
but they don't come right out, I think, and say the Mentalist. But in this one, this game show is hosted by, not game show, but competition show, is hosted by three characters, and one of them is played by the great Tim Curry, and
Hmm.
he is this really snitty, kind of nasty judge on this show, and someone is trying to kill him. So the guys are brought in to help investigate. And while the storyline itself, I think, is really good, and it's a good mystery, the guys, to go on this to do this investigation, they go undercover as contestants on the show,
Hmm.
and they have wanted to compete since I think as children they had auditioned
Hmm.
for, what was it, a school
It was
competition,
a
school
school,
talent
yeah, it
show, or
was a
something like
school
that.
talent show. Yep.
Yeah, and they pretty much do what they would have done back then when they were kids, and they end up doing this great, hilarious like mashup of Tears for Fears and Michael Jackson. And you've got Sean's got his hair up like very 80s, like you see from Tears for Fears and other acts. Gus is wearing the red Michael Jackson type jacket. There's moonwalking involved, and it's just this great, silly, clever episode. That's what definitely one of my
Hmm.
favorites.
And you just throw Tim Curry into that mix, and it's so good
Yeah.
because you're at this point you're kind of used to Sean and Lasseter and their dynamic, but you
Hmm.
put Sean with this really serious judge who is not feeling it, does not find him charming or endearing or anything, and it just makes for some great moments of comedy.
It does. I agree. And Tim Curry just nailed this
Oh, he's
character.
so
So
good.
yeah, if they didn't write it for him, it seems like they wrote it for him, because
Yes.
he was fantastic. It's one of my favorite Tim Curry roles, and I love him in just about everything. He was
Mhm.
great in that. Do you have another from the first season or later on your list there?
Yeah, so this is from season 3, and it
Mhm.
is the greatest adventure in the history of basic cable. And it is the
That's a great
one,
title.
right? It's the one where his Uncle Jack comes and
Oh
they go on
gosh.
that whole adventure and that treasure hunt.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and so that's an episode. It's so fun, it's so funny. Obviously, they're on this adventure and they're trying to find the treasure before the bad guys and that whole thing. But I also love it on a character level too, because you see more of how Sean has become the way that he has become, and you get to obviously meet his Uncle Jack, who is very adventurous and spontaneous and more on the wild side of things,
Hmm.
and him and Sean get along really, really well.
Right.
And then you see that contrasted with Henry. And so I think that was one of those episodes that really helped me see Henry in a more positive light than I had up until that point, because you see Henry's just trying to take care of Sean,
Yeah.
and he, growing up, tried to take care of Jack too. And so you just see this very like nurturing and caring side of Henry, and it just comes out different because
Yes.
it kind of has to.
You're absolutely right, and you see that kind of dynamic a lot in families too, where
Mhm.
maybe siblings will clash because they're so different, and one will try to take care of another one because they might have some issues, or need a little guidance, and you definitely had that with
Mhm.
Jack, and then Sean is shares a lot of similarities with
Yep.
Jack, and I want to shout out the actor who plays Jack too. I've been a fan of him for a long time, and that's Steven
Mhm.
Weber, who, if you folks remember the old TV show Wings, he was a regular on Wings, and he's done many, many things since then. Also, he's a heck of a book narrator. He does a lot of narration for books, and he's very, very good at that. But yeah, I love that episode too. I'm glad you mentioned
Mhm.
that. That was one when I was looking through the seasons, to see how. I tried to squeeze in as many as I could before we did this show,
Mhm.
and that was on my list, and I almost got to it today, but
Nice.
there just wasn't enough time. Yeah, that was a really good one. Do you remember, did Uncle Jack appear again throughout the series? I can't remember if he did or not.
I don't think so, but I'm not certain on that.
Well, regardless, that was an excellent, excellent episode.
Yeah.
And let's see, what do I got? We'll hop back and forth a little bit here. Okay, here's one of my favorites, and this is one too that it seems earlier you were talking about how they'll make their pop culture references to things, and like the guy from Tears for Fears, and how
Mhm.
that'll work its way into an episode. This was one that I loved a lot. There was an episode from season 5 called Viagra Falls. Do you know that by its
Yes.
title?
Yep.
This is one of my favorites. Basically, Sean and Gus and the members of the Santa Barbara Police Department are working this case. A former chief there has been murdered, and they're trying to solve it. But brought into the case are two former detectives, two retired detectives played by the actors William Devane and Carl Weathers. They've been retired for many years, both in their 60s. But they're Boone and Peters, and there are similarities to them to Sean and Gus, like throughout the episode. Like they've got their own little secret handshake that they do after
Mhm.
things happen. And Sean and Gus, there are times it's like, we're nothing like those guys. They're like, yeah, we are like those guys. And they kind of clash a little bit, but there's a lot of funny stuff in that episode. And I was talking about a pop culture reference that I love. And are you a fan of the Rocky movies?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, there's a part in there where these four characters of Sean and Gus and Boone and Peters, played by William Devane and Carl Weathers, are kind of going back and forth. They're arguing a little bit and just kind of, battling a little bit, arguing. And they're saying, oh, well, we gotta, go at it. We gotta get into the ring. And then Gus goes, ding dong or ding ding. And it's a reference to, I can't believe I messed that up. It's a reference to Carl Weathers played Apollo Creed in the
Mhm.
first 4 Rocky movies. And it's a reference to something that Apollo did at the end of Rocky 3. And when he did that, I about lost it when I originally, because I'm the biggest Rocky fan in the world. Yeah, it's ding ding. And he did it perfectly. And Carl Weathers gives him this great look. He just gives him this stare. And that's a fun episode. Those guys are great. I remember when that aired, I was thinking, I would love if there was a spinoff with these two
Oh my
older
gosh, yes.
characters.
That would be so fun. Just give us like a short, like limited series. You
Yeah.
just need like 6 episodes just with those two, just having a blast being, just an old married couple
Yeah,
basically arguing and
exactly.
solving murders.
Yeah, that was definitely a favorite of mine. And well, one other one too, and then I won't be selfish and continue talking. Is um, I love this Dual Spires.
Oh, it's so good.
Isn't
Yep.
that good? Can
Yes.
you want to tell the folks what that's about?
So that is the Twin Peaks inspired one.
Yes.
And so it's this little tiny town and a murder has happened there at the Cinnamon Festival, which is what is the reason why Sean and Gus are even there, which also that's just so much fun because they've
It is.
talked about the Cinnamon Festival like here
Hmm.
and there throughout the show, and then we finally see them going to a Cinnamon Festival. But anyway, they have to solve a murder there in this little tiny town. And yeah, there are a ton of Twin Peaks references in that episode.
There are, and a lot of the cast members from Twin
Mhm.
Peaks appeared in there
Yes.
too, which is really, really fun. I was super into Twin Peaks. I'm still into Twin Peaks. And so when that came out, I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Not only is it a play on Twin Peaks, but to have so many of the cast members in there, it was just brilliant. And from what I understand too, I thought was pretty cool is that James Roday either wrote or co-wrote that episode, and he is a super big fan of Twin Peaks. And I
Mm.
think the producer of the show had said pretty much to James, you just go for it, throw in like all the references you
Mhm.
want, just have fun with it. And they did that a lot. I think they were a very
Yeah.
interactive, cast and production crew where they just kind of let themselves, do what they wanted to do and have fun with it. I'd seen an interview with one of the writers recently, and he said that was why that's part of why he thought they had the success that they did because they
Mhm.
were doing what they loved doing. They weren't always trying to cater what a network might like or even what might bring in high ratings, but they said let's just have fun with this for as long as we can. And they had fun in their
Yeah.
scripts and their acting and all those pop culture references and like we said too, they came up with really good, clever mysteries. That's one of the
Yeah.
things that I love so much about it. Sometimes that's hard when you work in humor. I think
Mhm.
sometimes it's hard to pull off. I think there's just a handful of series that I can think of that were able to successfully do that. And another one actually was on the USA Network. I think Monk did a good job of that.
Yes.
Are you a Monk
Yep.
fan too?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I also watched Monk while it was on the USA Network. So there was that time, I think they were both on TV at the same time.
I think
And so there
so.
were my days where I'd be like, okay, yes, I get to watch USA and watch my favorite detectives. Oh, it was so much fun. They
It's
came
so
up with
much
some
fun.
good, like their good USA shows were just top notch. So
Yes, I
good.
agree. I agree. One other one I'll give a shout out to was I liked Burn Notice. Burn Notice was a pretty good show
Ah,
too.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't finish that. I think I watched
Actually, I
like
didn't either.
half of it, maybe. I watched a few seasons though, but
Yeah,
it
I
was a
think
good
for
time.
me it was losing me a little bit towards the end. I think they had maybe gone a little too far in directions I didn't care for. But yeah, USA did have some good shows. And interestingly, I just read I think 2 3 weeks ago that USA is hoping to sort of revamp that kind of programming. They knew they had a
Hmm.
lot of success with things back in the late '90s and the early aughts, and they're going to come back with more original programming. They said maybe along those lines. So that could be fingers crossed they come up with something as good as Monk and Psych, or even half as good, and they'll be in good
Yeah.
shape, I think. But yeah, I think you're right. I want to say that those shows even ran back to back for a while. I think it might have been Monk at 9 o'clock, and then Psych was afterwards. And yeah, just so good. And any other episodes you wanted to mention, Sarah?
There are so many. But see, that was always going to be my problem is I have too many favorites. But if I could just quickly shout out, so season 4 is just so solid, and I'm having a hard time picking from season 4. But I just want to shout out 2 episodes that are actually back to back.
Oh, please do.
One of them is Bollywood Homicide, and that is the one where it is it was an attempted murder of a woman who is starring in like a
Oh
Bollywood,
my
or it was a
gosh.
man
Yeah.
outside of a Bollywood show. And so then he thinks that he is cursed and is never going to find love. And there's a number of hilarious moments in that episode, but one of them is that Sean and Gus and then the woman that Sean is dating go to somebody's house for dinner, and they're having traditional Indian food. And the exchange between Sean and Gus is quite hilarious because neither one of them are able to handle how spicy that Indian
Oh
food
my
is.
gosh, that's right. That's
It's
right.
very funny. And
I
there's
haven't
this
seen
one,
that one since it originally aired, but I remember laughing so hard at that.
that
Oh,
scene is so
that was
good.
really good. That was
And
really
then the
good.
episode right after it is High Top Fade Out, which is where Boys to Men did the a cappella version of the theme song. And it
Yes.
is about Gus's college a cappella
Oh
group.
my gosh.
Uh,
Yes.
I love that episode. The actors that they got in there, they got Jaleel White and then Keenan Thompson are in that, and they're just so much fun together. They're so silly, and there's a lot of a cappella singing throughout, which is also just silly and fun because Sean wants to be part of the group and he's clearly not part
Oh
of the
my
group.
gosh. I forgot all
Um,
about that. That is hilarious.
so there's just so many great moments in that episode as well.
Oh yeah, that was a great one. Gosh, I haven't seen that one in so long. As soon as you started talking about it, I was trying to remember. I'm like, oh, I knew there were some big names in there as part of Gus's group, and as soon as, I'm like, oh yeah, Jaleel White, who always Urkel,
Yep.
but it's so good in so many other roles as well. But yeah, that was a great one. And what season did you say that was? Season 4?
Season 4. Yep.
Okay.
And those 2 episodes are back to back, which is wild. But even just looking through season 4's episodes, like there's so many bangers this season.
Yeah.
They really hit a stride kind of halfway through.
I agree. And I felt the same about season 5 when I was looking through the things too. I mean,
Yes.
there was a lot because that's where you had Viagra Falls, that's where you had Dual Spires.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't stop though. I mean, the series ran 8 seasons. Every season, you had stellar episodes. It's
Yeah.
very, you'd have occasionally, like any series, some that you liked more than others, I thought. But I thought the quality remained very good throughout.
Yeah, yeah. For me, the last season is probably the weakest, but
Mhm.
I mean, it's still highly entertaining.
Yeah, I agree. I agree, and that's one too that I didn't see as much of. I don't think
Mhm.
I don't think I have seen the entire season, and I think it's because
Mm.
of the job that I had. I was working nights and I missed it, but
Yeah.
that's going to be fixed soon because I'm going to be rewatching the whole thing. One of my favorites too was from season 6, and I saw this show up on a lot of fan favorite lists and like lists from different organizations like Entertainment Weekly, and that's an episode called "Last Night Gus."
Mhm.
And that was a pretty funny one. That one was sort of they were playing off of the Hangover, where you
Mhm.
had like the guys Sean and Gus and Lassiter and Woody the coroner, where they all were out at this celebration for a police officer who was retiring, and things seemed good, and then all of a sudden we cut to a scene of them the next morning all hung over and none of them are remembering what happened the night before, and then you find out that like, oh, Lassiter's gun was used, he was shot 3 times but you don't know why. He's wondering if he killed somebody, and there was a lot of clever and very funny stuff in there, and I thought Dule Hill in particular was hilarious in that, especially towards the end of the episode when I can't say too much, but there's some crazy stuff that happens toward the end, and he's a talented actor all the time. He's done
Mhm.
so many different things outside of Psych, like I said, West Wing and other things, and but he's really funny in that. He's so good in that.
And another episode that I love Dule in is in season 5, and it's the "Feet Don't Kill Me Now" episode, and that's the tap dancing episode,
I'm not
and
sure I saw that. Wow.
oh, okay, yeah, that one's so much fun because you see, because Dule Hill is actually a tap dancer, and,
Oh, I
like,
didn't know
that's
that.
one of his skills, he's a pretty talented dancer, and so it's just fun that they were able to incorporate that into an episode. That's something that Sean finds out that Gus is still doing, he's still tap dancing, and so it just integrates itself into the episode in a really fun way, but I love that the show made space for some of these other things that the actors could do to show off, other skills or other interests, and I think that's a perfect example of that.
Oh well, I have to check out what's that one called again, Sarah?
Feet Don't Kill Me Now. It's
That's a great
season
title.
5, episode 2.
Excellent. I will definitely add that to my very, very long list. Well, I'm going to watch the whole thing anyway.
Exactly. You'll get to it.
I'll get to it, And knowing my wife and I, we'll we're like a lot of people. Once we start really binging a show, that will take up a whole weekend, or take up
Yeah.
most of our nights. So I have to do this when we don't have a lot of other things on our schedule already. But it's just so good, and
Mhm.
it's held up very well, I think. I'm watching these episodes from, when did I say it started? 2006, and they
Mhm.
hold up good. And I think one thing that I like about this series, and I still think I see it a lot in a lot of the series that I love, is they didn't try to be, while there's all these pop culture references, it wasn't like a topical show,
Mhm.
where there's going to be references, from 2006 of, like Bill Clinton or
Yeah.
George Bush or Barack Obama, and because of that, I think anybody can tune into it now and watch.
Mhm.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with doing that, making references to the real world, but sometimes I think that stuff doesn't hold up as well. I even saw that in, are you a fan of Doctor Who?
I'm behind on my Doctor Who watching.
Oh, okay. You know what? I think you mentioned that in the article that you wrote,
Uh-huh,
didn't
I
you?
did.
Yeah. Oh, that's something I should mention. The reason that we came together with this is we both write on Medium, and there was a fun writing challenge going on there recently, and it kind of segued into all these different things. It started out with, what music would you bring with you to a deserted island? Then what movies would you bring with you to a deserted island? Then it was, what TV shows would you bring with you to a deserted island? And you, in your piece, had mentioned Psych,
Mhm. I
and I'm
did.
like, okay, well, I wanted to have you on the show anyway. I'm like, that's perfect. Let's talk about Psych. Several people mentioned Psych. That's
Mhm.
which is pretty neat. The show really,
Yeah.
really holds up. And excuse me, I can't remember the point I was trying to make with that, other than
No, you were talking about, like, how it still holds up, and I
yeah.
think you're right, like, one of the reasons why I think that works so well is because the pop culture references weren't from the modern day, but they were
Hmm.
from the '80s, and
Yes,
so
yeah,
that makes it timeless because if they were referencing stuff in the early 2000s, then that would already feel dated, but because they were already going back in time, it doesn't feel out of place, it doesn't feel outdated. Plus, the '80s are so iconic, it
yeah.
still holds up today.
It does, it does. And as being someone who was a teenager back then, I love that it holds up so well today, and that I edit my pop culture publication and I have writers in their 20s and 30s who are referring to these things that I know so well, and I don't feel like like I'm 90 years old talking to them about
Mhm.
it, because because it is so well loved, these things. I apologize. I don't know why I'm coughing so much.
It's because we're recording, that's
Well,
why.
exactly, exactly. I will be fine once I hit the stop button here.
Yes.
It's the way it always works. But yeah, like, oh yeah, I think I was saying too that the show does hold up so well, and what's nice is it's continued on. The cast and the crew have done 3 reunion movies
Mhm.
that I haven't seen any of them. I know you said you think you've seen the first one.
I've seen the first one, I don't remember it though, because 'cause it's been quite a few years. I don't think that I've seen 2 and 3 though.
Yeah, I've been curious about them. I've wanted to watch them. I think one of the things that maybe deterred me a little bit was, I don't know. The actor who played Carlton Lassiter, for those who don't know, is Timothy Amundsen. He had a stroke in real life, and he wasn't able to fully be in the first movie. I think he had just recently suffered the stroke. They worked him in as a cameo role, and he is in the second and third one. And I don't know exactly how that all happened. The actor, thankfully, has recovered quite a bit. I think he is able to talk really well, and I think maybe it's his one side, his arm doesn't work, maybe
Mhm.
on his left side, but he's acted, he's appeared in some other things. I know he was in the TV series. He had a recurring role on This Is Us towards the end of the
Mm.
series, and some other things. But I think maybe I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to watch it without everybody there. But the more I'm talking
Yeah.
about it, yeah, I'm going to watch that too. I'm probably going to watch them after my little binge-a-thon. And yeah, I'm happy that they've done those. I don't I think I heard that there is talk of doing a fourth one as well. So if the audience is there and they're able to maintain
Mhm.
the quality, why not?
Yeah, and I think that just goes to what you were talking about the people involved in making this were just having so much fun, and I think that was probably a primary driver of the show, so it's probably one of those, like, as they create these other movies, they're just like, "Okay, we wanna have some more fun, like, let's just
Yeah.
come together around a really fun idea and create this thing," and so that's just something that I personally wanna support, let's support people making things because they love it and they enjoy it, and that's just always that comes through in the final product, and you see that in Psych.
Oh, absolutely. And I love the titles that they gave for the well, the first movie I think was called Psych the movie. Then the second one is Lassie Come Home, which was a great reference to the old Lassie movies, but of course Carlton Lassiter as well. And then the last one I think was centered around Gus, at least to a degree. It's called This Is Gus, which of course plays
Mhm,
on the popular This Is Us TV series. So they're still having fun. They always had
mhm.
great episode titles too, as you've probably all noticed from the titles that Sarah and I shared. Just such a clever and really charming show that I think
Mhm.
anybody, any age range could watch and appreciate.
Yeah, yeah, and there's so many different types of humor in this show too. Sean has a very distinctive type of humor, but everybody has their own flavor that they bring to things. Even Carlton, he
Hmm.
is so hilarious
He
sometimes.
really is.
And it's that very like dry, stern kind of humor. And so if you're into that, Carlton's great. So this ensemble cast makes it so that there really is something for everybody. It's not just stuck in one narrow lane of humor, and it's also it is a comedy, it is a mystery, but there's also elements of drama in there. There's some good character stuff. Like it is a very well written and well rounded show.
Yeah, I agree. Very, very well rounded. And one thing that I like about it too is that sometimes I think where some shows get into trouble is even if they have a large cast, the writers and producers maybe center it and give all the good material to one or two
Hmm.
particular characters.
Yeah.
Here, while obviously Sean and Gus were the main characters, they gave great lines and great storylines to Carlton, to Juliet, even to a minor character like McNabb. They'll
Hmm.
give you like it was very well rounded. It wasn't just all geared towards Sean and his silly sense of humor, or him and Gus being silly together. Um, just all around, you had great characters, great storylines, and I think that's why it worked so well and why we're talking about it today.
Yeah, and it's like you've been mentioning, it's very witty, it's very clever, and another thing that I love is that they include kind of inside jokes for the audience too. So like one of the things, and this was especially prominent when it was on TV, is the pineapple. And there was
Oh,
this
of
spot the
course.
pineapple contest.
Yes.
And so once you're in on it, you're just always looking for the pineapple. When is that going to show up? Or there's these other like recurring themes like Gus's nose is the super smeller, and that shows
Oh
up
my
all
gosh. Yeah.
throughout the show. You know, Sean calls Gus magic head, and that's from season 1 or 2. So all of these little inside jokes that once you start watching, you'll pick them up, and it'll be something that they mention in season 1 or do in season 1, but it's paid off in like
Hmm.
season 4 or 5 or whatever. And so I love that intentionality, and I think that just goes to how much fun they were having, and it wasn't just this, like, "We are going to create this thing, and you, the audience, are going to consume it," but it's almost like this, like, conversation that we were able to have, especially when it was on air, and it
Hmm.
just I don't know, they tapped into something really special with this show, and
They really did.
how and I think that explains why the audience connected so much with it too, and why it's amassed such a following, is they created those inroads for us to be part of the conversation almost.
Exactly. And maybe this is a corny thing for me to say, but I always felt that, the producers and everyone involved with the show really respected their audience. They
Mhm.
were,
Oh, yeah.
they weren't always, I said it earlier, they weren't always going for ratings, but they wanted to entertain. And for those of us who were sticking by them regularly, they wanted to give us what we wanted, and plus always a little
Mhm.
bit more. And the
Yeah.
pineapple thing, I got to tell you, Sarah, I was this close to buying a pineapple to have like back on my bookshelf. I really was. I was going to go to the grocery store this morning, and I had it in my head, and my wife's going to come home from work and say, "Why do you have a pineapple on our bookshelf?" Because I would forget about it, because that's what would happen. And I didn't feel like eating a pineapple later, so that's why it didn't
That's fair.
happen. But yeah, it was so neat that they did that, and it became a contest. I remember.
Mhm.
Wasn't there stuff online where you
Yep.
you would like try to find, you would enter contests to say where the pineapple was seen in the episode, and it just got to be, there was no real reason for it other than that they realized that they had a pineapple in the first episode, and they just kept rolling with it.
Yep. Yeah. It's these fun little things that this show did, and I think that that's I don't I love those things, and that's just kind of how I watch TV and movies, is I'm paying attention to a lot of little details, and so something like a spot the pineapple, I was, "Yes, I am zoned in. I am on a mission. I will find this pineapple." So I think it just endeared the show to me even more.
Yeah, I love stuff like that so much. I'm currently watching Community. Have you ever watched that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and there's stuff in there. Well, they will like build a joke in the first season,
Mhm.
and I'm currently on the fourth season, and they'll make a reference to it. And if you weren't a regular watcher, you're probably not going to get it. But they pay that kind of, I guess, fan service to their loyal viewers. I love that kind of stuff. I geek out
Mhm.
on that kind of stuff, so it's fun. It's definitely a lot
Yeah.
of fun.
It rewards you for paying attention and
Yeah.
watching, and like you said, I feel like Psych did respect the audience, and I think it wasn't just these, like, gimmicky things, but it was more of like, "I'm gonna include this little Easter egg in here as almost like a gift or, like, this, like, fun thing for you guys that have been so loyal." So it just I don't know. I love that stuff too. It's so
Yeah,
fun.
it's so much fun. And folks, if you've watched this far, I mean, you've probably been a fan of the show, or you've
Yeah.
seen it at least once or twice. If you haven't, and thank you for watching, really go check it out. It's such a
Mhm.
great series. I know it's available on Peacock. It's probably available elsewhere too, and it's just such a great show. And I'm
Mhm.
excited to
Yeah.
rewatch it now.
Yeah, yeah, I it's been a few years since I watched it, and then we started talking about this, and so then I started handpicking episodes. I didn't even make it into the 2nd season because I just watched half of season 1, but there from the moment that I watched the pilot first, because you have to,
You have to,
and
yeah.
the second that it started, I just got this, like, big goofy grin on my face because this show is so much fun, and it's not afraid of being silly and having fun and being goofy and all of those things, like, Psych knows what it is, and it's fully committed to that, and
Hmm.
I think especially today, there's so many shows that are, dark and gritty and all of this, and I love all of that. I love me some grit, but it's also fun to come back to a show like
I love
this.
me some grit. That's a great
I
line.
do. But, the show is just pure fun, and you
It is.
can't help but love it, and so, yeah, check out Psych. If you've watched it before, watch it again because it's a
Yes.
great rewatch.
Exactly. And like Sarah said too, folks, I mean, it's so easy to just watch them
Mhm.
over and over, or to get watching it and not stop. That was pretty much yesterday and today for me. There were things that I was supposed to be doing in my life yesterday afternoon that I had plans to do, some obligations to do
Oh,
that
no.
I kind of blew off. I mean, it wasn't like I left somebody waiting to be picked up from the hospital or airport or anything like that. But it's easy to get wrapped up in it and just
Mhm.
let yourself get wrapped up in the murder mysteries, get wrapped up in these oh so wonderful characters and the humor and clever stories. And yeah, I can't say it enough. If you're not already a fan of Psych, you will be if once you start watching it.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And I wanted to mention, well, a little bit more about my guest here. Sarah, you have, in addition to your podcast, where else can people find you online?
Yep. So obviously podcast for movies and TV. And then I am also an author. I've published a number of Christian devotionals. They're pretty short, easy to read, and just uh kind of giving a framework and a space for you to just like meet with God, whatever
Oh,
that means for you.
nice. Very nice.
So yeah, you can find out more about that on my website, which is sarahjcallen.com, and all of my books are there, and I'm also on all the socials at Sarah J. Callen. So yeah, you can find out more of my stuff there.
And I recommend that people do because it's a great website and you can learn more about this very, very talented guest of mine. So thank you so much for being on the show, Sarah. I had a blast talking with you about the show.
Yeah, this was so fun. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. And there's another, I don't know if we're going to do it or not, but there's another show we were talking about that we'd like to talk about. So if you didn't hate this, maybe we can work that into your schedule sometime. So, and if you did hate this, tell me after I hit stop. Okay.
No, this was great, and
Okay. Well,
that
great.
other show is just a gem and has
It is a gem.
developed quite a cult following. So I don't think it was super appreciated when it came out, but man, people are kind of ride or die for it now, and so
Yeah,
that show is also just so fun.
it
So
is
I
so
would
fun.
love to come back on and talk about
Oh,
it.
that would be awesome. I recently rewatched the first episode of that, and
Mm-hmm.
I watched it with my wife. She had not watched it when it originally aired, and she loved it too. So I'm going to be doing a
Oh,
rewatch of
good.
that. It only ran, well, all right, well, we'll save that for when we do the show.
It's just a teaser,
It's
we'll
just a
come back. We're
teaser.
leaving you on a cliffhanger.
We're leaving
You
you
gotta
on a
come back
cliffhanger.
in the future and listen to our to be determined episode.
Well, thank you again, Sarah, for being on. And to my audience, I thank you very much for being a part of Gotta Pop. No matter what you're doing today, I hope you enjoy yourself. Have a wonderful day. Thank you again, Sarah. See ya.
Thanks.